So we just completed at least the first pass with the work breakdown structure. We will now begin to move on to the next step. Again, any questions? So here we are. This is session 4, and we just completed step 1, and we're about to move into step 2. Remember, there's 7 steps, and there's only, what, 2.5 days? Or 2.5 sessions left? So we got a lot to do. This next part will go really quick. All right, so the next step, we're going to jump into and do what's called a rough cut resource allocation. And we're also going to determine the effort and duration for each of the tasks that you've identified in your work breakdown structure. So in step 2, we're now, like I said, we're going to identify resources required. And again, our approach, and this is really the approach you should take, is not using names when we start out looking for what resources we need. We need to look at the work that needs to be performed and determine what skill level we are required to complete that task. So again, as part of this, we're going to have to look at the task itself and determine how complicated this is, because we're going to have to come up with an estimate. And we also need to look at if this is a task that we've done in the past, do we have any historical information? Typically, when organizations start looking at this at this level, very few organizations have actual historical data. So whenever the first project you start with, that's when you start capturing things. One of the couple key elements, number 1, what resources are available, right? You're going to need to ask that question. And then we're going to need to ask the question, how much time is this resource available? Again, you got to remember, if you have resources that are shared between different functions, that you need to ask, how much time is this person going to have to work on my project if that person's working on multiple projects and doing their regular job, right? Because we run into that a lot. So we need to understand how much available time does the resource have based, again, on the skills that we require to perform that task. Here's the other thing, and we're going to talk about this especially when we start talking about the budgeting piece, right? You don't want to estimate too tightly, right? You want to allow for some unexpected things, but here's the thing. As we go into this next phase, in our WBS table, right below it, we have assumptions and we have risk. Now, when we start talking about the skill level, and especially when we start talking about time, we're making a lot of assumptions about time. This is also the place that we need to start noting if, for example, we're down at the task level, and let's say you go and talk to the person at the task level who's going to be performing, and they give you a rough estimate, you need to ask the question, is there any buffer, right? Because what tends to happen is, as you look at every layer of a project, and if it's real deep, every layer is going to put a little pad to it. So what's going to happen at the end? We're going to have a very large pad, right, to that activity. So we've got to make sure we start tracking that and understanding where it's at, because especially it plays a major role when we start looking at the budgeting side. And again, you're going to have to make some fundamental assumptions as we start talking about time, the estimated effort hours, as well as the duration to get the work completed. So when we look at this, we're going to have to start looking at how many people do we need to perform that task, right? So we need to look at the number of resources. We need to look at how much time, again, I keep coming back to the availability time, because I think when you look at the biggest challenges on any project, it's the availability of the people to work on your project when those individuals are not dedicated to your project. And that's where most of the errors occur, is these assumptions are made, oh, this person has 8 hours to work on my project. If that's a shared resource and that person is working on 2 or 3 other projects, there's no such thing as 8 hours in a day. You might get an hour, You might get 10 minutes. Right? It depends on the subject matter expert, right? It depends on the individual or the skills. We do want to take a high level approach because this is what's called a rough cut, which is at a high level. It's our first pass at a high level. Again, what we also want to look at here, we want to look at the skill level of the resource. Don't think about the individual you want to work on this or actually perform the work. If you do, you got to look at what skills does that individual have. We have to look at the task, and we have to look at what skills are required to perform the task, because that should define the who. Right? The skills required to perform the task should define the who, which in turn is going to define how much time they're going to spend. Let me give you an example, and this is real life example. In my past life, when I worked at Siemens, our projects were very long. So we always looked at budgeted the hours for very high skilled individuals. When it came time to do the work, maybe those high skilled individuals were not there. But the big impact was if you don't have the same skill level, they're not going to be able to complete the task in the same amount of time. The task is going to take longer. Now, there may be a dollar difference, but now that anytime the time gets extended, I just impacted things downstream. That information coming off of that, from that resource for that next step, it just delayed, which means it affects everything downstream. So we need to understand what skill level do we need. What we actually end up using may be different, but then we need to understand what is the impact to the time schedule when you do that. It may be at lower cost, but if we just delayed the project, that's not a good thing. It's probably going to cost us more in the long run. So these are things you need to keep in mind as we go through and identifying the skills. Now, the resources for each activity, we're going to identify the people, the material, and there'll be a cost associated with that, both from the labor side and the material side. So this is how we designate on our Post-it cards. If we were doing this in a room, we would have, again, in the middle, get my pointer here. So in the middle, we would have our task, upper left. You identify the skill level that we need. In this case, it's an engineer. On the right-hand side, we identified the resource, the number of resource, and eventually we're going to get to identifying the name of who's going to do the work. But for this first pass, what we need is what's the skill level and the number of resources. And we're going to do things a little different in Miro. It's going to look a little different because you're now allowed to use the corners. So what we're going to do in Miro is the skills. And I'm going to show you, we're going to use the tab function and I will show you first before you actually start. In the tab function, we're going to use red to identify skills. That's the color you're going to use, and this is where it will show up. So show up first. Then we're going to use orange for the number of resources, and you can attach the name there. Okay? But at this point, all we're looking for the purpose of the exercise, just the number. So you're going to use orange for that. Here's a real example. So on this one, so define assessment methods. So that's an activity that needs to take place. Here's the other thing. In this particular organization, they were going to use internal and external resources. So I know, Kevin, your project, Team 3, your project, most of that work is being done outside. It's going to be outsourced. So you can identify on your Post-it whether it's an in-source or outsource. This one said in-source. MIT means Manufacturing Information Technology. So this is the guys that, in this particular company, these are the guys that program the equipment. And so they need the IT, the hardware IT guys, but they also needed an applications, the specific applications for that piece of equipment. And they were using 2 people, okay? You see the same thing over here, okay? Defined by standard. So this is defined level of demonstrated knowledge is someone who understands the standards and 1 resource. So when we're looking, there's two numbers we need to look for, okay, when we're looking at time. When we look at time, we've identified the skills, we've identified the resource, the number of resources. We're now going to calculate what is called effort hours. This is the actual labor hour. So the definition of effort is the number of actual work days or hours required to complete the task. Effort does not equate to duration. They are two different things. And I have seen when we've walked into companies where some companies basically bring the two together and say effort hours is the duration. Two different things. Effort hours, when we talk about effort hours, that's the actual labor hours to complete the task. Duration, the definition of duration is the elapsed time, calendar time, could be in hours, could be days, could be weeks, could be months, just depends on what the activity is, but it is the elapsed time. Let me give you an example. So, how many of you watch football? Okay, so can somebody tell me how long is a football game?
Without the commercials, I think it's only like 28 minutes or something like that of actual time they're playing. It's ridiculous.
Okay, well, it's a little more than that, but you're right. So when
It's 60 minutes of play and like 3.5 hours of duration.
Okay, so there you go. So officially there are 4 quarters. You're right. 15 minutes per quarter, 4 quarters, 60 minutes of play. The duration of a football game is like 3+ hours, right? That's the difference between effort, right? They're officially only playing 60 minutes, but because of all the stoppage and all the substitutions and all the commercials and everything, a 60-minute game turns into 3+ hours. Okay? That's the difference between effort and duration. And so you may have a 15-minute task, but that may be a full day because the availability of that individual, maybe they only have 15 minutes in a day to work on your project, right? So we've got to separate the two. And when we start talking about performance measurements, because we will be talking about that next week, one of the things you need to measure, you need to have 2 separate measurements when it comes to this. You need to be able to measure the percent complete of the effort hours completed, which equates to actual, because the only place you can attach dollars to is the effort hours. You cannot attach dollars to the duration period. And so you want to be able to measure the percent complete of the work completed. And you also want to measure the percent complete of duration because that's the overall time. Because if you're off, but if one of those is off, that's an indicator that something downstream is going to change. It may affect the overall cost and the overall end date of a project. So we also need to understand, because as we calculate effort, and especially how we calculate duration, we need to understand the availability of the resource. So let me give you again an example, and I'll keep it a simple example. If on a day, I'm going to pick on Krista, on a day, on any given day, Krista only has half a day available to work on anything other than what she's dedicated to do. So that means she has 4 hours on a daily basis to work on your project. If you assigned her a task that has to be completed, that's going to take 20 hours, right? 20 hours. How long is that? How long is it going to take to complete? How much duration is it going to take? 5 days, right? It's going to take 5 days. You would assume 20 hours. Well, she can get that done in 3 days. It's 24 hours worth of work, right? 5-day duration. And you really need to understand the availability of the resources, because that's how planning gets out of whack, right? Because people assume, well, they're 8-hour days, it's 20 hours worth of work, we should have it done in 3 days. Rarely do people, especially on a project, internal projects where people have their primary jobs and then they have all these additional things that are added on top of their primary jobs. And so I've never walked into any organization that any employee has an 8-hour day. Now, if you're looking at an hourly person never has 8 hours. They have a break in the morning, they have a break in the afternoon. So the most you can get out of them is what? 7.5 hours. I can tell you, I mean, different industries have different standards, but the reality, if you look at manufacturing in general says you're lucky to get between 5.5 to 6 hours out of any employee in a day. Construction's worse, right, Mike? So you just need to recognize what is the truth, because when you're estimating, you can estimate the effort hours exact, but when you're estimating duration, you got to be conscious of the resources you're going to bring in and the availability of those resources to define the duration.
Hey, Jess.
Yep.
Quick question. In your past life, when you dealt with contractors, did you ever put stipulations on deadlines for a project? So if they didn't reach that deadline, you would possibly deduct some of the contract?
Yeah, it's not unusual. I mean, Mike, you can chime in. There are it's not unusual, penalty clause apply. But this goes right back to the first thing you need to do is be crystal clear in writing the definition of on-time completion. What does that mean? And what is it? One is the time, the day, in other words, a day early, a day late, and more importantly, what is considered to be complete. This is why it's so important that that is defined in the scope of work of what is the expectation at the end of the project, what is complete. Because often, and I've been asking Kevin here in regards to the project, the parking lot, because in some cases, warranty periods is considered the completion of a project. Sometimes the end of delivery or the end of installation is considered completion of the project. And there's still a warranty period after. So you got to be crystal clear as to what is the end of the project. And again, we walk into most companies, and like I said, everyone is at least the 98% completers, because there's always the 2% that never gets completed. It's still out there. So you got to be real clear, and then you need to tie that back to the financial piece. Is what does that mean? In many cases, there are contracts that are written that say we will pay you up to less 10%, right? Because we want to make sure everything gets complete. When everything, quote unquote, is completed, we'll pay you. There's a period that we'll evaluate and then pay you the residue or the rest of the contract, right? So, or a percent of the contract. And so that varies also. So there's a variety of ways you can write up contracts to ensure that the work gets completed. But you got to be really clear, because it becomes a back and forth. It was very interesting. Yesterday, I was loading some video. I was loading another video to our site, our YouTube site, and then I started watching this one video where it was funny. There was a dispute between a contractor and a homeowner because they had done work, and they were both arguing over the fact. One was arguing that the work was done. The other one was arguing that the work wasn't done. And it was all about the expectation, and they did not document, right, what was the end date. And so there was this, it was interesting. It was about 15 minutes of arguing over the completion of the project and payment. You want to avoid those things, because sometimes then lawyers get involved, then it costs you a lot more. Other questions?
Jess, for the skill, can you have multiple red rectangles on one sticky?
Ideally, you can try to label all those in one. Yeah, the answer is yes, if you want to do that, but you should be able to list all of them as one label.
But you can have multiple. I guess you can have multiple rules on one sticky.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. So again, the example that I just showed where it said the MIT person in the application, it's saying I need for this task, I need someone who knows the hardware side. I need someone who knows the software side. And so then that equates to two different resources. Now that may be one person that can do both, but I need to make sure whoever performs the work It needs to understand the hardware side. It needs to understand the software side. So yeah, the answer is yes. So estimating methods. Obviously, the simplest one is to, if this is a project that is very similar to something you've done in the past, going back to that project, and if you used all the tools and you collected actual and compared actual versus what was planned, then you can use that as an estimate. And most folks are starting, so they don't necessarily have all of this, so that's the easiest one. Next one, if you don't have history, is then to estimate. Then you're going to estimate based on knowledge. What you need to do is go talk to the individuals that perform the work and ask them to give you a rough estimate of both the effort hours. Two things you're going to ask them for. How much time, how much labor does it take you to do this, and how much time would you need to complete that task? And so they can give you the effort hours and give you the duration. Now, again, just be conscious. If you're the project manager, those individuals are always going to pad both numbers, right? So you just have to go through and start asking and getting clarification. It's okay if they want to pad it, but as a project manager, you need to be aware of that and understand that. Standards. If you have standards, right? Estimates that are based on standards and fee schedule. Perfect example is anytime you go to a mechanic or to the dealership, let's say you take your car into the dealership, they have a book that has standards for replacing every part of your car, and that's what they use to give you the estimate. Now at the end, it may not be the estimate, but that's what they use. So those are called standards. So you can have standards that have both a hour time-wise estimate and a fee estimate already pre-calculated. You can do a calculated risk. In other words, you can do an estimate and then apply some factor. This is something I've seen a lot in construction. They say, well, it's a fee, and our factor is, we always throw a factor 26% on there because that's what we think we've been operating. So they take a number and multiply it by 126. Okay, that's a guesstimate with some gut feel, right? So you can do that. It's a calculated. Now, if you take the PMI course, they actually have specific formulas. Quite frankly, those formulas versus gut feel really are not that different.
So Jess, when I was working for an industrial contractor, we had what was called bogey units.
Yep.
So I don't know how many trades actually have that. I just know the ones that I was in, but do all trades kind of have a bogey unit calculator for, basic labor?
It depends. Well, it depends on the organization. I can tell you, no, not everyone. We have walked into companies that had no idea. They were just, every time they just come up with a different number. And so really not sure. But there are a lot of companies, a lot of organizations that do. And they may call them different. What did you guys call them?
Bogey units. So I was a pipe fitter.
Yep.
So we called them bogey units, and it was basically time for specific tasks related to installation.
Right. Now I'm going to ask Mike, because Mike came from the mechanical side. You guys were doing plumbing, right, Mike? Did you guys have anything like that?
No, we didn't. We didn't have it.
And so to your point, some companies do, right? Because one of the things when we work, especially with construction companies, one of the things we help them understand is coming up with standard assemblies and what we call standard installations, right? So those, then you can create what you guys were calling bogeys. That's how you can create those. But you start up with, this is our standard method for installing or assembling pipes, or on the electrical for installing, let's say, wall outlets. This is the standard. And then that becomes the standard labor unit. and a cost associated with that labor unit that you can then use to estimate a project or estimate a job. And then you can compare. So yes, so to answer your question, no, not everyone has that. Actually, I would say most people don't have it.
Okay, thanks, Jess.
And by the way, since I have Brad and Susie in here, this is also true. By the way, this also applies, it's one thing for the trade, but it also applies on the professional level side, right? The cost, an hourly cost for an engineer, an hourly cost for an accountant, an hourly cost, same thing applies. Not all companies have a specific unit, cost unit associated for those levels as well. Because if you're a mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer, you also have to come up and estimate hours. We have to do the same thing. Now, we have a pretty good standard as to what those hours are and the costs associated, but not everyone has those either. So it's not just the trades, it also includes the professional level side too. Here are some things to think about when you're estimating the time. What's the overall objective of the project? And who is the customer? What is the technical and functional requirements of the task? If it requires highly technical, you need a very specific subject matter expert, you need to understand that, because that may take longer. The cost is going to be higher because of the level that you're bringing in. And again, if you down the road are not able to get that skill to perform that resource, it's someone of lesser skill, they'll still get the job done. The thing is, there may be a long learning curve to figure out what they need to do and how to do it and when to do it. And so that will impact the schedule side, which in turn may impact the financial side. Historical information from something similar. Again, that's ideally what you want to do. Oh, I want to go back to the customer piece. Jump to the top. One of the things that, and we do it too, and there are other organizations that I know my past life, when a particular consultant was involved on a particular project, we always knew that we had to add what was called a grief factor, because there are certain customers that are very difficult to work with, and they have extensive requirements or require a lot of hand-holding through their process. And so you need to be aware of that as you're looking at these tasks. Now, if anyone has to bring in inspectors, you might need to add some grief factors if you're bringing in external inspectors. Just remember that for some of this stuff. Knowledge of the technology to be used. That's another thing. And this goes right back to the project brief. If you're bringing in brand new technology and no one internally knows, including the project team, there might be a learning curve internally. And so you need to be aware of that. Also, you need to consider the inputs and the knowledge of people that you're interviewing. Are you interviewing and getting an estimate from the person who's done this before, or are they just the department head saying, here's what I think? That may, again, there's a big difference between a department head may not know exactly how to perform a task, even if they claim they used to do it 20 years ago. Because I've seen a lot of that, and we hear a lot of that. Well, I used to do it. When was the last time you did it? Oh, it was 10 years ago. Well, that may not be what's happening today. So again, going to the right people. Again, you need to understand, where's the information coming from? The availability of the resources to be used. You need to understand the availability of those resources. The capability of the resource. And especially demands on the resources from other projects and their regular jobs. And then any other constraints. And when we talk about constraints, here are some, let me just throw some out there, constraints that you need to look at. You need to look at constraints when you look at seasonality in a business, right? For example, I'm going to use accounting, for example. Accounting typically at the end of year-end closing, usually they get tied up, and you really can't tap anybody from an accounting perspective. For those of you who are related to your seasons are attached to harvest season, the availability of certain people, right? Because of harvest season, or the preparation for harvest season. So if I've got my mechanics, my maintenance folks, those folks are going to be busy prior to the harvest season because they're preparing everything for harvest season. So it's not necessarily seasonality as it relates to what time of the year, it's related to your own particular business. We have a customer, a client, that is in the vision insurance business. And their seasonality starts in November, very high in November, very high in March. I'm sorry, very high in November, very high in December, extremely high in January, high in February, and it goes off in March, and then it slows down. Why? When is it, what time of year is it that you sign up for insurances? So either, if your insurance is going to change, for them, they get a lot of insurance claims at the end of the year, and then when people have new insurance, that's when they take advantage of those insurances at the beginning of the year. So just understand your business seasonality, because that's going to apply constraints. So going back to our Post-it. So we have 4 corners on our Post-it. So now we would put down here in the lower right is the effort hours, and it's tied to the number of resources. And this is, by the way, total effort hours. So if I had 2 people here, my total hours for those 2 people would be 30 hours to complete this task for those 2 people. So here, typically the effort is put in hours, so, or minutes. Okay. On the other side, lower left, this is where we put duration, days or weeks. And when we talk about weeks for standard definition, we're talking about working weeks. So in Miro, what we're going to do is the effort hours are in purple. The duration is in black. Red, orange, purple, black. Again, back to how this would look on the normal, what we would normally do. We would have total hours. So this one here, 6 hours for 2 people. And basically it's defining the assessment method, and they had a standard, so it wouldn't take very long other than some modifications. So 6 hours for 2 people. 3 weeks, because the availability of these guys in this particular company, very little availability, because this is these guys were resources shared between 43 facilities across the country. So their availability was very, very limited. And so basically gave them 3 weeks to do 6 hours worth of work. Over here, same thing, 1 resource, 8 hours, 1 week to complete the work. Any questions on that? No questions? Okay.
Yeah, yes, I had one question. Sorry, if you could go back one.
Sure.
You explained it. I didn't catch it. The I dash MIT, was the I for internal?
Yes.
Or?
Yes, I is for internal.
Okay.
Right, because there was a whole, let's take your project as an example.
Yeah.
The software guys and the software, they had their own consulting guys that would come in and do the install. What we were looking at is, what does the organization need to provide? They needed to provide a defined assessment method. In other words, and they already had, because this wasn't the first time they've implemented software. So they just had to refine their standard into the specific. In this particular case, they were installing SPC, statistical process control software, across the company. And their involvement was they needed to review the document that was standard for other software to see how it could be used for the implementation of their SPC software. And so it required the hardware guy to look at it from the hardware perspective and say, you know, red line, change this, change that. And the application guy, the software guy, internally to say, here's the things we need to change. And that's why it was only 6 hours. It was just a review of their normal standard implementation process and just change specifically for this particular software. But this was as internal. There was another posted higher than this that said out, this is what the contractor was going to do for the installation, or the software company was going to do for the install.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to give you some time to do this, but before we do that, I want to show you how to do it in Miro. Okay, so I am going now to share the Miro screen. Okay, I'm going to pick one since I was on team 2. I'm just going to make this up, all right? You guys have to correct what I put in here. So if you go, let me zoom in. Can everybody see it? So I click on the Post-it. This ribbon appears, right? When I click on it, I'm sure you've all seen that already. Right here, it says add a tag. You click on that. And remember, red is the first one. And then, what do you say? The red is the skills that I need. What's this task say? Monitor open review statistics. I need a sales guide to look at this. So that's red, and then I hit create, and it automatically takes it to the bottom. Now, the second was number of resources, and I said to use the color orange. So first I type in the resource, and by the way, well, the numbers are going to come up, so if you're going to repeat, see how you see sales here? So if I wanted to use sales on a different Post-it note, I could just click on that and it drops it in. So I need 2 people, 2 sales guys to look at this. And I said orange, there's orange, create. Doesn't matter, all that's important is the color. Don't worry about the order, as long as the color is correct. And then the skills. I'm sorry, the effort hours. This is going to take 2 hours. And the color was purple.
Did you say purple?
Yep, purple. And hit create. See it there. And then duration, 2 days. And that color is what?
Black.
Black. There you go. Don't worry about the sequence. What's important is the color. That way we all know when we're looking at the colors what that means. And that's how you tag the Post-it note. So like I said, normally we put them in the corners. And the purpose we do this, whether it's here or whether it's on Miro or in live in one of the rooms, is because we can go to that Post-it and see all the information around that Post-it. Right? So we don't have to be chasing things. It's right in front of us. Any questions on this? You guys got it? All right. I'm going to give you guys 35 minutes to add that to your current. And if you need to continue to add or clean up your WBS, go ahead and do that. You have time to do that. Any questions? And by the way, team 2, you're going to have to clean up what I just did. All right, you guys ready? Okay, here we go. Sending you.
I thought.
So I got skill is red, so that was the salesman.
Yeah, so that was a
Duration
skill. Yeah, so the skill is I needed that somebody with a sales background to look at the information. So that's the skill level. So if you need, for example, electrician or a journeyman electrician or an apprentice electrician to do the work, or mechanic, right? Or plumbing, right? Same thing. Just what is the skill? What skill and what level do you really need to perform the task?
Yeah, okay, so I got skill red, duration is black, effort hours is purple. What was orange? That's the one I missed.
Orange is the number of resources. So I have a
okay.
skill level and how many resources I need, for example, plumber, journeyman level. And then so that's the red, and then the orange is how many of those do I need? I need 2 of them.
Got it, okay, I got them all now.
Or a millwright. I need a millwright, but what level millwright do I need?
Got it, all right, thanks. All right, so we can just divide these up. Rolando, you take care of the electrical. Eric, you take care of the mechanical. I'll take care of the acquisition, and Ralph, you want to do the planning?
Yeah, that's fine.
So we got to change these tags?
Ten days.
Yeah, I was gonna say about 2 weeks. So
Let's overestimate and say, yeah, I think 2 weeks is good. That look good to you guys?
mhm.
All right. What'd you do to our thing, Jess?
It looks good. What I would recommend the purple, put in there whether they're hours or minutes or days or whatever that is.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you edit? Do you just hit the tag again?
Yeah,
Oh,
you go to the tag. If you want to look, you can't see it, so double click. So if you double click on it,
Uh-huh.
and then what do you want to edit?
Just the hours
So go click.
on 4.
So click on, what you're going to have to do is hit tag. And when you click tag, you can go edit. There's a little pencil right next to the number
Yes.
in there. Click on that, and that allows you to edit.
Okay.
Did you see that?
Yep, got it.
Yeah, so click on the actual tag. Now double click the tag and then hit you'll see next to it when it pulls up, there's a pencil looking icon. Click on that and you should be able to change, you should be able at that point to edit.
Okay, got it.
Okay?
And that's okay having the two in red, the lawyer and the GM.
Yeah,
to
that's
deal
fine.
with the contracts. Okay.
Yeah, so you need two, basically, you've identified two resources. One's a lawyer and one's the GM.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, what I would recommend you also do. If you're going to use the term GM, for you internally, that means you're general manager. But as an outsider, that could mean, since you got a lot of contractors, that could be a general contractor.
Mm-hmm.
So make
So
sure
put that
down.
in our definition of terms.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I can take care of that.
Yeah, and you guys may want, part of this next part of the exercise is it's time to start allowing other people to go to other Post-it notes and put their estimates, and that way you guys can just do a quick review if you guys agree or don't agree. But you'll be able to complete more if you guys start spreading some of the work around.
Yeah.
Again, in your case though, most of it is you really, this first one is really the primary one. The rest of it is you're just going to have to estimate duration for each one of those contractors, or how much time you're going to give them to. Really, this is your time to define how much time you're going to give them to complete the work in, and their contract should be telling you how they're going to achieve it in that time frame.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we should probably do that. Split it up so that we work on these and then just communicate, and so we can fill more in. Otherwise, we'll probably take the whole 35 minutes and then some.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
I'll take the asphalt contractor tab and down, if that's okay.
Okay. I'll do, I guess, 3.0 sponsor coordination. Actually, maybe yeah, I'll do that one.
And that beta test captures all, what's the word? What is a technical term you would use other than just issues? Beta test captures all errors.
Troubleshooting.
Yeah, I like that better.
So a suggestion for all of you, this may be the time where you guys split up and have folks just kind of, and I know this is heavily dependent on Luke, but come up with the hours in each box, and then as you get towards the end, you guys can start reviewing and adjusting. But at least, if you guys can do that, if you guys can put some estimates in there. I understand this may not be 100% real for Luke, but gives you a chance to start putting the information in each of the Post-it notes.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And Luke,
Yeah.
you're the project manager, so you're going to have to go in there and correct them and say, this is wrong. This should only take 5 minutes, not 10 hours.
Where are your estimates coming from?
We could all just divvy up the sections and put the tags in, and then Luke could come along and change the numbers.
There you go.
Okay.
So you
Now
can
we
give you a rough estimate.
Do you want to do just the hours for right now, or are we doing all 4 of the tags?
All 4.
Yeah. So, Luke, let's at least identify all players involved, and we can we can kind of drop the red boxes down here, and we can copy and duplicate as necessary. So who would be, what groups would be involved, or functions would be involved?
Yeah, engineer.
You hold on.
Click on the tag and then you click on
I just can remove it.
the ribbon, and then you click on the tag you already created. It should pop up.
Okay, so what did we say, 40 hours?
40 hours for effort.
And duration of those 40 hours?
Let's say between install and then testing, and maybe some getting in a couple different directions with other things going on, and maintaining the continuity of the all the other users at the same time. 3 or 4 weeks. 3 weeks maybe.
Yep, I'd say that's doable. I would just to keep things simple, knowing where we're going, I would just put it to either 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Just round them to the nearest week, either up or down.
Okay.
All right. After when we get to the scheduling component, we're breaking down by week, so it'll be easier. So you're not getting to the half weeks.
Okay.
1-3.
Yep. General support structure for software, both internally and externally.
Not sure what that means.
Now again, just because it's up here, now we're starting to put stuff in here, right? That's in there is, does it actually fit? We don't, just because it's here doesn't mean we need to actually tag it with the tags and whatnot. This is where we start cleaning up as we go along too. So remember, we redefined this header as just hardware devices and support. So if we think we have that covered within the first 2 post-it notes and this one doesn't apply, we can just move this post-it note out of the group. What I tend not to do is do not delete. I just tend to move them out of the group because it may fit another group somewhere else. So if this
What about if we just change? What about if we change it instead of removing it? Change it to finish the thought process on this hardware and say the next step might be, what do you think? What do you guys think? User training, user testing and training, and go live.
Well, those are post-it notes in other areas of our WBS, though, right? We have Go Live out there, and we have other stuff. But you're talking specific to hardware.
Yeah, I'm just talking specific to this task.
We could do that. We can put that in there. So we're going to change it to hardware testing and Go Live.
Testing and training. Yeah.
Okay, I just updated it for you. Go ahead and do your resources.
Testing and training.
I think that becomes now the hardware engineer and the user.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the 2 resources.
Pleading innocence because I haven't used the backup button.
I used
Well,
it
I
once.
haven't either. Somebody has.
I used it once.
Well, how's it going? Looks like you guys are pretty darn close to being done.
Divide and conquer.
Good. You guys followed instructions. Not everyone's following instructions. Good. Any questions? Any questions on how to change or edit? You guys,
No.
did you guys go in there and edit the tags?
We've had to. I tried to edit one time and it wouldn't let me create or edit. So I just had to change the number to a new number because it just wouldn't let me out and there was nothing I could do. So instead of 8 people, it was 9 people, but that's okay.
Well, you can go back and change it.
Yeah, it was weird. It wouldn't let me do it.
Interesting.
Yeah, every once in a while it wouldn't let me add it in a certain way. It wouldn't let me save it or hit the create button until I.
The one thing you let me quickly just recognize that if the number is already in there,
Okay, then
just
it.
click on the tag and it
select
drops it in versus having it may not allow you to recreate the same number that was already
I
in
think
there.
that's what was happening because I ended up just clicking on it where it had already existed.
Right.
I think
Then
that's what
auto-
it did with me, but it was the wrong color.
Oh,
And so that was the trick I had. I was trying to put 8 participants or 8 resources and it kept coming up with 8 hours. And I didn't want it to be purple. I
Oh,
wanted
you
it
just had
to
to
be
change.
orange.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what it was, I think.
Okay. Good. Guys, look, we're almost there. We got about 4 minutes left. The others are going to have homework to do over the weekend.
Oh, I'm glad we don't have to have homework.
Yeah, you might still have homework because we have other stuff to do too. So, but I think you guys.
Come on, Jess.
Actually, I think you guys are gonna finish first.
Oh, good.
So you might get in the not the next section, but or after this when we start working on the budget, on the dollar amounts. I think you guys are going to be done quick. So more than likely you won't have homework. Everyone else will.
Does anyone know what 1.6 is talking about?
ID criticals, so identify the criticals in scope of work.
Okay.
So I think it's kind of like solidifying the scope of work, which is 1.3. But maybe identifying the critical ones, not just the total scope of work. So the criticals on this would probably be our time schedule, our financial schedule, our contracts.
Okay, nobody hit undo.
All right. Well, how's it going?
We're working through some Miro issues, but I think we're close.
Okay. What issues are you running into?
Well, we've been deleting tags. If we delete a tag, we've been deleting them the whole tag, and so it removes from multiple sticky notes.
Because you're deleting just leave them in there. What you can do is just change them or modify them.
Well, the pencil too removes
The pencil
all of
removes
them.
them all, yeah.
So like you can delete it or you can click the pencil and it unselects it.
Yep.
If you click the pencil, isn't it modifying all of the other?
Yes. Yeah, don't click the pencil.
No, but you got to be on a specific because you can have multiple color ones, but you have to be, if you use the same number multiple places, if you click on the pencil, they're going to change it wherever you use the same number.
Yep.
All right. You guys
we're moving.
You got less than 30 seconds.
We have to re-put on the orange ones.
Yep.
I think they all.
That went by fast.
Boy,
Yeah, we got 6 stickies done, man.
How many?
6.
Only 6?
What do you mean only 6? That was amazing work we did.
We did 6 and we eliminated 2 whole categories of about 12 stickies. So we're doing great.
I'm gonna count those. You gotta count those, Chewy.
We finished all of ours, Chewy.
Well, it sounds like someone's going to have homework to do.
Yeah, Chewy.
Jeez, guys.
All right, is everyone back? All right, let's see. Okay, so let's take a quick 10-minute break. It's 10:46. Everybody back at 10:56, and we're just going to do one more portion, which is we're going to get into the roles and responsibilities and the budgeting piece, and then we're going to do some work, and then we'll do a final report out. But the budgeting piece is going to be your homework between now and our next session, which is next Friday. So you'll have plenty of time to go fill in the boxes where you haven't filled in the boxes, for some of you. Some are going to be done by today. Right, Kevin? He's not saying anything. All right, let's take a quick break. Everybody back at 10:56.
Sorry, I had my phone call.
No problem.
Trying to manage an outside vendor right now on another project, and he keeps calling me. Saying,
All right.
I can talk to my supervisor.
There you go.
Okay. I'm on, but I'm going to have my camera off because nobody wants to see me eat my lunch.
Okay, that's fine. I know you're back.
Yeah, I'm back. This is one of the things when you work at a place where there's a lot of people that bring in really good food. On Fridays, they like to sometimes do like a big catered thing. And so they brought in enchiladas today. I couldn't pass up.
There you go. And you're not sharing. Jeez.
If you want to look at, I could show you, share.
That's okay.
We're doing the Zoom from your office next Friday.
Yeah, that's right. Just bring $12 and it's all good.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Okay, do we have everyone back? Is that a yes?
Yeah.
Josh? Oh, Chewy? Lost his connection again?
Yeah.
You're back? Okay.
I'm on the phone and on the computer. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm having Wi-Fi issues, Brad. I'm just kidding.
Let me get right on that, Chewy.
I tend to remember something about hardware. Wi-Fi hardware wasn't included, so.
There you go.
It is now, and the systems engineer is in the process of getting hired. So Chewy, your solution might be a few weeks or months out.
Good.
In the meantime, maybe Chewy can be the system engineer.
Oh boy, you don't want that.